Baseline the car, we just did 2 back-to-back dyno runs, and it made about 168 horsepower to the wheels.
We're here at World Motorsports East, where we're going to install our 2011 Descendant turbo kit on this donor vehicle right here. You can also reference Cousin Rob's video where he goes a little more in-depth on mechanics and how it works a little bit. For me, we're just going to go at it and install this thing. First thing we're going to do is we already baseline dyno tested the car and got its base numbers, what it comes out from the factory. So now I'm going to slowly disassemble the vehicle piece by piece, systematically, and then start placing our parts on the vehicle. What you want to do is just take your time, do it right one time, do it right the first time, and don't make any mistakes. Take your time and just make sure you do every piece 100%. That way the install is going to go cleaner, you're not going to have any problems, and it's going to be a done deal. You have it done a lot quicker than if you tried to rush it.
One of the first things we want to do is disconnect the negative battery terminal, just to kill power to the vehicle while we're taking these parts off. We don't want to arc anything or short anything out. Some of the bolts you might need to use a little bit of penetrating lube to get some of the stuff off. Just added safety. You don't want to spend time extracting broken bolts out of the vehicle. So as I'm working from the top side of the car, I want to crack a lot of these manifold bolts, get them kind of loosened up, pull off what I can in the top, and then as I put the car up in there, I'll drain the fluids and work on the bottom of the exhaust. You want to make sure you disconnect the O2 sensor. As this whole assembly comes out, we have an extension piece for when the turbocharger and all the new exhaust components go in. But it's important to make sure everything's disconnected before you start yanking the parts out. I'm going to disconnect the mass airflow sensor and the stock intake tube and the factory air box. This is all going to go bye-bye. So we're still working on the top side of the car. We're slowly disassembling the components, the factory components that we're no longer going to be using. This is the bottom side of the airbox. We're not going to be using any of the factory parts on the airbox. So it's all going to go bye-bye. There'll be a bunch of things connected to wiring harnesses and plugs. You want to make sure you have all those disconnected before you start yanking stuff out. This is like the kind of a cold air tube that goes down in the fender well. I'm trying to snake at it here. This actually connects to the lower side of the airbox. So I've kind of finished the top side of what I can pull off. I'm going to put it up in the air, drop some fluids, and pull off the lower part of the manifold to the exhaust assembly. So now I'm disconnecting the lower exhaust and all the manifold bolts that bolt to the block for the supports. It's a little tricky to get at, but I have to get rid of them. Oil bucket. Now we're going to drop some oil out of the car. Now I brought the car back down. I'm going to get some of the final bolts that hold the bottom of the manifold onto the block, just support bolts, and then I'm going to pull the manifold out from the top. I usually leave 1 or 2 bolts in the exhaust manifold right before I take it off, just so everything stays in place, and as you're ready to pull it off the car, take the last 2 off. Make sure everything's unplugged. You don't want to risk ruining a sensor because you forgot to unplug it. Just want to double check. If you feel any snags, put the thing back on the car and double check your work. Now all the bolts gone, everything's disconnected. Get out of the car. Now I'm going to start working on the fuel system. We need to upgrade the injectors because the factory injectors don't flow enough fuel. So complete with the kit comes new injectors. I'm just going to pick apart. It's kind of a hard spot to get to. I'm just going to slowly start taking off some of these clips and some of the things attached to the fuel rail. I'm going to pull out the whole fuel rail, swap the injectors. You might have to use an inspection mirror, but it's not too difficult to get back there. You also want to make sure the vehicle hasn't run for a while because there is fuel, it's going to spill. There was a pressure inside the rail, so you do want to let it sit for a little bit, maybe just, undo the gas cap, let some pressure out, and just take your time, let the car cool off, don't get burnt or anything like that. You don't definitely want a hot engine while you're spilling gas all over it. Go through and disconnect the clips on the injector. Just note which color clip you're pulling off. It'll help you identify what cylinder they're for when you go to put them back together. I pulled the stock injectors out. These are the new 750 injectors. We're gonna throw them back in. I didn't take the rail out. I just disassembled it from the head and moved it back. I'll be able to stick these in and align these with each port and then tighten the rail back on. Basically, I got the new injectors in, the rail kind of tight. I'm just checking that all the injectors made it into each port. And then I'm gonna tighten them down and put the clips back on them. You wanna make sure the injectors are lined up in the holes before you tighten down the rail. You definitely don't wanna break one. We're gonna get a Mishimoto radiator for this car. So what I'm gonna do now is just drop the coolant out of it, start loosening up some of the connections. So once that thing arrives tomorrow in the mail, we'll throw it in. It's our turbocharged unit. It's how it comes from Turbonetics. We're gonna assemble the fittings on it, oil feed, oil return, and then I'll start assembling some of the exhaust components, the exhaust manifold to the turbo, downpipe, and the wastegate. And we're gonna pick what spring we wanna use for how much boost pressure we wanna run in the vehicle. So I'll just start with the turbocharger and start putting the fittings on it. I'm gonna use a little bit of Teflon tape for the oil feed. Not too much. It is a pipe thread. This will help seal it. You definitely don't want to block any of the oil passage. Just want to make this snug. You don't want to over tighten it. And on the drain, comes with hardware and gasket and a fitting. This is the drain back to the oil pan. And this is how we'll couple it. Gasket. And then we'll use a line that's with the kit that the oil will drain after the turbo's pressurized past the bearings. It'll drain back into the oil pan by gravity. I am loosening the bolts that hold the turbo clocking position, the center section to the exhaust housing, to the compressor housing. Basically, once I get this in the car, I'll be able to rotate them to the way I need fit for the kit. So I kind of know roughly that fitting wants to be straight up. Kind of lock that end down. And we're going to take off some of these bolts. Basically, I'm just kind of loosely putting this V-band connection on the turbo. Just kind of want to lock this down. Not too tight because we want to fit it in the car and get it to the correct position we want to have the turbocharger facing. All right, so basically I've assembled the turbocharger downpipe and the wastegate on the whole assembly, and what I'm gonna do is dry fit this in the car. Just do a couple runs, drop it in, make sure the things are positioned correctly the way I want them, then snug them up, pull it back out, and do its final fit. Well, this car has a humongous stereo in it, so basically they oversized the battery to compensate for all the electrical components they're running. With our turbo kit, this might be a problem. So this really big battery, we might have to figure something out. There's the intake tube and then the intercooler tubes that have to come past it. So what I'm gonna do is just pull it out of the car for now, see if I can make the pipes fit. If it doesn't fit, drop it back in, and we'll get a smaller battery. So now I'm gonna take off the inner fender liner and start putting the intercooler in.
On this particular application, it comes with a side mount intercooler, but there is an upgrade for a front mount. This just keeps it out of the way of all the air conditioning components and the front crash bar without too much modification.
Cap test fitted the intercooler. Now I'm fixating it to the car with the 2 supplied bolts. We also need to take this out. This is a blocked off brake duct in the factory front bumper. This is where we put our intercooler, so the intercooler does need some air to run by it, so this actually has to come out.
All right, looks like we got our radiator from Mishimoto this morning. We're gonna put it in the car.
So you can see how thin the stock radiator is in this setup. Not much cooling capacity in that as compared to the Mishimoto one. It's almost 3 times the thickness. More surface area, a lot more cooling. I normally keep the lower hose on the radiator because when you pull these things out, you wind up getting a bath of coolant. If you don't, there is a lot of fluid left in these things.